Hey there, my name is Acer. I'm a top level runner in Zenless Zone 0, and today I want to talk about grouping mobs. So what is so important about grouping mobs? How should you tackle them, and what are some of the small intricacies that you might not know that will help you achieve your best times? That is what I'm going to cover in this video. There are many factors that are involved in a speedrun in Zenless, but almost no factor is more important to your in-game performance than how you group mobs. No matter what category you decide you want to focus on, you are almost always going to be faced with a group of enemies in your way to achieving a great time. The in-game timer is determined by time spent in combat and time spent inside the TV exploration. TV movement and optimization can only really save you a few seconds at most. Almost all of the time saved comes from how you do in combat. What this means is that if things go poorly, you will lose a massive amount of time. So naturally, you will want to kill everything as quickly as possible, but the enemies can make it extremely difficult for you to do this. Often the enemies will move with a mind of their own and will not line up for you. So what should you do? To start, it depends on your character. In this video, I will be using Ellen as an example, since she is the main meta character of speedrunning at the time of this video's recording, but most characters have the tools to do similar things. Ellen has a few ways to group enemies, but your absolute best tool for this is to use her dash attack. It's a wide move that provides good damage, can stagger smaller enemies, and pushes the mobs to where you want them. Often you will need to herd the mobs where you want them before you can fully start attacking them. While you do this process, there's a few important things to consider. First thing you want to take note of is what kind of enemy are going to spawn in this wave. Your grouping strategy should keep in mind how the mobs will behave. For example, if there's a ranged enemy, they will often be programmed to be stationary or back up to safety. Or if they're melee, they're programmed to chase you down. As a general rule of thumb, anything that wants to run away from you will be the problem enemy. So if you notice there are ranged enemies, they will be your first priority to group, since the melee units will almost always just follow you. Position yourself on the opposite side of the pack of enemies, so that you can push the mobs to the rest. You will need to move quick, but with enough practice you will be able to start grouping before the mobs have enough time to run away. After the ranged enemies, take note of any mobs that may have spawned away from the rest. You will need to make a choice of if you can get them with the rest or if it's best to leave them alone. Sometimes they will be too far and you do not want to let the other enemies start to disperse. If you cannot group the majority of enemies, either because of your own mistakes or the enemy AI does not want to cooperate with you, it might be better to reset if the category allows it. If it does not, do your best to mitigate the time loss. Once the mobs are grouped, you can start to kill them. Since you will be hitting them all at once, any resources you spend or time you spend attacking will only need to be used once to wipe the entire pack of mobs. The time you will save from this may sometimes be up to double the time of someone who killed each enemy one by one. Now you know how to approach grouping mobs, but is it really that simple? Unfortunately, no. You see, not all mob grouping is equal. Sometimes there are level-specific issues you will need to manage. For example, there are levels in the game such as Escape from Certain Doom that have multiple different layouts. Some of these levels, like this one, have different layouts based on random chance. Others will have mobs that spawn in different locations. What this means is that on one run, they could all spawn together in a nice group, or they could all spawn behind a wall, making it almost impossible to group properly. The game is still only a month old right now, and the speedrun scene is still growing, but as time goes on, we will have a better idea of which levels contain these RNG elements. But there is a general rule of thumb you can follow. If the enemy spawns are what is random, simply restarting combat is enough to change their spawns. There are many categories that allow you to do this, so make sure you check the rules ahead of time. If the level layout is what is random, however, you need to fully exit combat and go back into the level to change the layout. Use this knowledge to find the versions that let you group and clear enemies the fastest. The last thing I want to talk about is other small things that affect grouping. Depending on your team in Bang Boo, you might have other ways to group mobs. For example, Resin Abu on Juyeon teams will sometimes use its skill to automatically group the mobs. Nicole also does this as well with her skill. Check what Bang Booing characters you have access to, and decide if they will be worth any potential DPS loss in exchange for grouping mobs more efficiently. Lastly, small mobs get dazed quicker than bigger enemies. Consider if your team wants to use this, or if you do not want this to happen. For example, Ellen's chain attack is long and laggy. While it has its uses, it's often more worth it to just let the chain attack drop. There's so many more things to say on this topic, but as you play more and become more familiar with the levels, you will get a sense on how to handle smaller problems and find strategies to group enemies efficiently. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments for me and I'll do my best to address them. Also, join the Zenless Zone Zero speedrunning Discord if you want to talk with me or anyone else about anything I've covered. Don't stop running, Zenless.